was about 9 years ago that I was approached to become a board member of the Andy Warhol Museum. And I was indeed honored, I was humbled, but I also had selfish reasons in wanting to join the board. As a product of a liberal arts education, I was taught that you always want to keep looking for opportunities to learn. You always want to feed your curiosity. And I truly felt, not only I felt I could help as a CEO being on the board to advance the mission and to keep the museum relevant, but I also wanted to learn more about art myself. And I wanted the ability to learn about the man, Andy Warhol, Pittsburgh's own. Shortly after joining the board, I started becoming more attached to the museum, and I really couldn't articulate why at the beginning. There was something about this whole Warhol enterprise that was really interesting to me. And through the years, I got the opportunity to meet with people that worked for Warhol, worked with Warhol, as well as people at the Warhol Foundation and the brilliant experts that we have at the museum. And it hit me one day that as a businessman myself, I looked at Andy Warhol, and he was a successful, a brilliant business strategist. And where some artists, they use perhaps their inner self for inspiration or it's a whim, I truly believe that Andy Warhol set up a business strategy. He executed that brilliantly throughout his life, and now here we are 27 years after his death, and he's now known as one of the greatest artists in American history. So this whole concept of the business strategist Andy Warhol really intrigued me. So what I'm going to do today is kind of take you through that model, take the lid off of Warhol Enterprises, and kind of give you a perspective from my view as to what made it successful. As I often do as a CEO, I go to books if there's something I want to read about or something I want to be fresh about. And there are about 3.9 million books that are out there on Amazon that a CEO like myself can go to. And I thought that if I see potentially a connection between art and business, or an artist and a business person, maybe somebody's written about it. Well, surprisingly, nobody has. So what I'm going to try to do in my presentation is to look at this from a perspective of if Andy Warhol had written a business book, what could he have taught us about business strategy? There's two things I'm not going to talk about today. I'm not going to spend any time talking about the interpretation of Warhol's work, what that meant to consumerism or his take on society or capitalism. There are hundreds of books out there that do that. I'm not going to touch that. Nor am I really going to spend a lot of time other than this slide talking about Warhol as a leader, a business leader. I mean, the man had $700 million when he died, so he truly had some sense of business. He ran a film studio, he started a magazine, produced a TV show. So I don't think there's any question he was a leader. But why do I think he was a strategist? What I'm going to do is give you 4 examples of what I truly believe were his strategies that made him a success. And the first, and I believe this perhaps was the most important, was his conscious decision to use the silk screening process is his method by which to make his art. And in the beginning, in the early 60s, when he started trying to sell the art, obviously he needed something to feed the enterprise, feed the beast, so to speak. And silk screening was an efficient process. You see here the 8 Elvises that are there. He actually did 27 in a row on that canvas you see, and was able then to split it up. There's a single Elvis, double Elvises, triple Elvises, the 8 there, and then actually at the museum you'll see 11 Elvises, which was what was left over. So he could make money quickly by that process. But more importantly, in the early 60s, if you think back to that period of time, consumerism was rampant. Okay, people wanted everything that they could get their hands on. If the neighbors had it, I want it, keeping up with the Joneses. And Warhol truly felt in this period of time that if I create art that looks mechanical, people will believe they can buy it, and if they feel like they can buy it, they're going to feel like they're buying something that's technology-driven, modern, and something that will last for years. And he felt that handmade art really wasn't something that the consumers were connecting with. And up until that point in the 20th century, most art was elitist art, and he wanted to change that model. But more importantly, the last point I make here is he wanted a signature way of being recognized and to differentiate himself from his contemporaries. So this became his signature media pretty much throughout his whole life. The second point I want to make is his choice of known subjects. Andy Warhol grew up in Pittsburgh, a very poor child, a lot of health issues during the Depression. And he would often escape with movie magazines and read about Shirley Temple or Judy Garland. And that was his escape. And he felt that unlike some other contemporary artists at the time, if I do portraits or if I do things that people can relate to, I might have a market here. So trying to pick known subjects that create an emotional bond with the customer or with the person looking at that. The third point is his willingness to adapt his work. After he had established himself as a pop artist using the silkscreen process, he felt that maybe there's different markets. Maybe there's people out there that want different things than what I've been doing. I have on here, if you see on the bottom left, it's a car crash. And Warhol decided, if I can create a positive emotional bond with people by showing Marilyn Monroe and Liz Taylor, there's also perhaps a negative emotion that might sell my paintings. And when you drive past a car crash, what do you instinctively do? You look. So Warhol tried to capture that in his what were called Death and Destruction series. This is a car crash with, if you look closely, you'll see an arm or whatever sticking out. But his point was, I want to go after that market. Maybe there's a market. Now, if you, in your living room, are looking for something like this, he would make it green for your couch cover. He would make it teal if you wanted it to match your carpet. That was the business side of Warhol. But he tried going after that. Other parts of that were his, he used an electric chair as one of his subjects, as well as lynching. So he tried the dark side of emotional connections as well. The last point I want to make is that if I were to describe Warhol under today's vernacular, he would be an early adopter. He would be that one person that wants to have the newest and greatest technology as quickly as he can. Going back to the 60s, whether it was the handheld tape recorder, which he was one of the first to have, to the 80s, right before his death, when he was using a video camera to create his art, he looked at ways to use that technology in his work. Most recently, if you've read the press, I would say, I think it was April, there was actually computer discs that were found from 1985. He was one of the first artists to use a computer. It was a Commodore Amiga to create art. He took about 27 of his images and recreated those on the computer. We just found the discs, and through great work at Carnegie Mellon, we were able to re-get those back. Very bitty, if bitty is a word, but nonetheless, Warhol works from that period of time. He truly felt that if you stay ahead of technology trends, that's going to give you an advantage, and it did. The Polaroid, which you see here, he loved the Polaroid because it also made it efficient for him. If you came in to get your portrait done, the Polaroid gave him instant access to look at various angles of what's your good side, your bad side, and just a real big fan of technology. Okay, I've talked about silkscreen, I've talked about Marilyn, I've talked about car crashes. How do you bring all this together? How can I translate this into what perhaps a business leader might take? And here are essentially my translations. That if you create a core business everybody can relate you with, you're going to be able to reach more customers. They're going to know Warhol, silkscreen, Warhol, Marilyn. Great thing to do. Identify your product with the belief that all people can afford it. Okay, you don't want to create a business plan where we're going to have the most expensive product, nobody's going to be able to buy it, and that'll be good. You have to have that feeling that everybody can get it, and Warhol got that. Build a business concept to create an emotional connection between your customer and your product. Very, very important. And I'll talk in a few minutes about some examples of companies that do that really, really well. Broaden your offerings into new markets while maintaining and focusing on your core business. Sometimes companies tend to very quickly get out of what they do well. They forget what they do well, and they go into new things. And that never works too well, and a lot of companies go bankrupt because of it. Then the last point, utilize the newest technology to solidify your market position, but also look for cost efficiencies. And I think Warhol did as well, and as part of his product development, was able to save some costs for the enterprise by doing that. So kind of the Randy Dearth perspective on how Warhol did his business strategy. Some companies up there, you know them all, and you probably should immediately have an emotional reaction to them. Perhaps you didn't know, Starbucks actually has an entertainment arm. They are actually producing their own music. They're actually producing and publishing books. Took their core business, because I still think expensive coffee, but they've done that very well. Amazon, I can't get out of my head the drone on 60 Minutes, which was several months ago, and selling books and building it into a business model using technology that's selling toilet paper and anything else you might want. And of course, Apple, I think, is the epitome of a company that is constantly expanding, going into new areas. The iWatch will probably be in 3 years when we meet here again on everybody's wrist. A lot of good things. And Tesla's my example of creating emotional connections. There's a huge demand, a huge emotion towards the environment. What Tesla's done is said, we're going to create an auto for those people that are so emotionally tied to that. There's no gas, it's not a hybrid, it's 100% lithium batteries, and they've done a phenomenal job in doing that. And I think they're going to be a very, very successful company going forward. There are other companies that perhaps have not done so well. They've failed to keep their customers in a good relationship or a good emotional bond. Kodak failing to recognize technological changes. Walking into a Radio Shack store or an Apple store, which one do you feel more rejuvenated and excited and connected with? That's why, Polaroid is bankrupt. The Polaroid that exists today is a totally different company. These are companies that failed to look at the principles that Warhol so well established, failed to reinvent themselves, get into new areas, and quite honestly, I believe in the next 5 years, these companies will be completely gone, which is a shame. So let me conclude by saying that, by opening up your mind and looking at things differently, as I've tried to do with Warhol, it really has excited me to learn that he was such a great, phenomenal businessman. And I would encourage you, if you haven't been to the museum lately, in the typical Warholian style, we have gone through a total rehang, we've redone the museum, but I would encourage you as well, as I have done, go into the museum, explore it, see the things you like, critique the things you don't like, but just experience that. So thank you very much.